And we're back. Welcome to the TreMade Commentary, episode 2. We've got a pretty filled podcast going on today. We're going to talk about Quiet on Set, the dark side of kids' TV, the docuseries that's been going around. It's trending. Everybody's been talking about it. You know, all the iconic shows that I grew up with since I was born in the 90s, like all that, and Drake and Josh, and The Amanda Show, and Keenan and Kel, and all those sort of shows. So talk about that and the culture behind it. A little bit of little bit of toxicity going on, it seems like, with that boy Dan Schneider and a lot of the other people, but we'll get into it. We're going to talk about a new student loan forgiveness plan and who might qualify, right? Biden's trying to, rein it in. He gave it a shot. It didn't work out, but he's back again with a new plan, and we're going to talk about it and break it down to who might qualify and etc. Then we're going to talk about Boeing airplanes and their safety issues, which is actually pretty wild. I watched a documentary recently on their planes, the 737 MAX, and thought it was super interesting. And what do you know? They're back in the news for some safety problems on another airplane. So we're going to break that down and talk about that. Then we're going to talk about aliens and what's going on in that world. Got some hot takes. Then we're going to talk about homelessness in California. It's no secret that that's a big issue, right? But I've got some interesting information that I want to share with you all. So we're going to talk about that. So buckle up. It's going to be wild. And it should be a fun one. I think it's fun anyway. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. We're going to dive into Quiet on Set, the dark side of kids' TV. Currently, it has 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, right? It's a docuseries about the toxic culture behind some of the most iconic children's shows of the 90s and 2000s. And essentially, there's this guy named Dan Schneider. It really paints him in a bad light. For those who don't know, Dan Schneider is the mind behind Drake and Josh, all that, and The Amanda Show, and a lot of others. But, in the docuseries, it talks about the culture. But, because when you're growing up and you see all these shows, it seems incredible. It seems like, oh, man, these kids are living just such amazing, interesting lives. They're famous and they're, I don't know, like they're not going to school, obviously, or maybe they are for like an hour a day, but they're spending their days making Drake and Josh, which is a super fun show to watch. And so you would assume that it's got to be fun to film. But anyways, that's not the case. 2 female writers split the pay of one's salary. This goes against the rules of the Writers Guild. And at this time, my understanding is that this did happen on other shows. So it's not like this was probably the only one that it happened on. But because it's a docuseries, obviously, like, it's getting some traction. And that's what one of the episodes is about. New writers would take an L to get their first opportunity. Similar to like other creative fields, like in music, to get in production, you often do a ton of work for nothing. I know that I've done that, in my creative journey as a music producer and audio engineer, or you're like a runner at a recording studio, which I did as well. It's basically like an unpaid janitor and DoorDash driver. You're like picking up food, you're running errands, and you're cleaning bathrooms, man. You're cleaning bathrooms, you're cleaning studio rooms. And true story, I once worked 2 days straight with no sleep at a recording studio as an intern for no pay, right? That's a true story. That actually happened, and it was horrible. And I left there because pretty much I was up, right, for 2 days straight. I didn't sleep. And then when I went to leave, there was no thank you. There was no like, hey, thanks for sticking around and cleaning up all these studio rooms that were totally wrecked with a lot of like paraphernalia and other nasty stuff that I'll spare you the details. They were just like, I don't know, they said something about, I don't know, it was like a critique or something like that. And I was like, beat this. I just stayed up for 2 days, doing this for no reason. It's not like I was gaining any experience. So it was totally bogus and totally a waste of time. And actually, I mean, it's definitely probably wasn't legal, but it happens all the time. So, I kind of attribute the taking the L to get experience. It's not as bad as what I may have endured and what other people may have had to go through, but yeah, it's definitely not right. Anyways, 2 employees working on all that became registered offenders. One being Brian Peck, who played Pickle Boy on all that. This is a dude that literally his character was to just have a big old like plate of pickles, and he would just pop up randomly like, I got some pickles. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, as an adult, it doesn't make any sense. He did have kind of like a quirky, like weird look about him though. Like he would always be like, pickles, you know what I mean? And so obviously you can put two and two together. I'm not going to say it, but I'm not, and don't have to spell it out for you, but it's a kid show. There's a random dude named Pickle Boy that's walking around with a platter with a bunch of pickles. You know what I'm saying? So they're like, that was inappropriate type of thing in retrospect. But I mean, you know, I don't know. It is strange. But that dude, what do you know? He was suspect. And what did he do? He manipulated Drake Bell. He kind of got into the scene, and he even tried to talk Drake into getting him cast into the dad character role on the Drake and Josh show. So this dude was he was manipulative, and he had a thing for younger people. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. And really sad, actually. And it ended up happening between him and Drake Bell, actually. And there was a whole like offender thing going on. And so they basically, Drake Bell had a girlfriend that he started spending a lot of time with, because this dude, Brian Peck, got in between like Drake Bell and his dad, because Drake's dad was his manager and was the one kind of, you know, guiding the show or helping his kid out. Like he was being a really good dad from my understanding, or at least is what the docuseries kind of paints his dad in that sort of light. And but yeah, this dude Brian Peck, weird creepy dude that Drake Bell met on the set of it might have been the Amanda Show or something like that. And then, you know, Brian Peck starts kind of I don't know, just getting his way into like, you know, more personal with Drake, and kind of starting to get in his head. But he had a thing for young people. So he was scheming the whole time. It's not funny, but dude was like, he was scheming. Like that was his game. And so, you know, he ended up basically, you know, pushing Drake's dad out, and Brian kind of became that manager figure, which is crazy. But I mean, it happened to Drake, but I'm sure it's happened. And, you know, I don't want to say for certain, but it probably has, you know, to other people, certain, situations like that are similar in Hollywood. But there essentially was a court case. Obviously, this came to like a head. Drake was spending time with his girlfriend, and then like I think Brian Peck and Drake Bell, or Brian Peck, had set it up to where he wanted to go to Disneyland, I think it is, because that's in California. You know, I'm on the East Coast, so Disney World is where everything's happening at, but Disneyland over there, and Drake used to love to go there, so Brian would take him, and he had said, I'm going to take you to Disneyland, but Drake had a girlfriend, and I think at the time he was probably 16, so he was spending a lot of time over there, and Brian Peck started calling him like crazy while he's at his girlfriend's house, just calling him and calling him and calling him, and you know, and Drake finally picks up, and Brian is really upset. He's like losing his mind, essentially, like real crazy, like controlling type stuff. And praise this woman, you know, like Drake's girlfriend at the time, her mom was like, yo, what's up with this dude? You know, and Drake's like, oh, this guy's kind of weird. I'm trying to distance myself from him, etc. And she's like, nah, like no 40, however old Brian Peck was at the time, 40, 50-year-old. She was like, no 40-year-old man is gonna call a 16-year-old over and over and over like that, you know, under normal circumstances. Like there's something going on, like what's going on? And so Drake opened up to his girlfriend's mom, gave her the details and let her know what was happening. And so bada bing, bada boom, they basically created like a sting. And from my understanding, they kind of like tapped Drake's phone or whatever. And Drake called Brian Peck and was like, why would you do this? You know, I'm feeling kind of uncomfortable. You know, why did you let this happen type of thing? And they got him. And there was a court case against Brian Peck, and Hollywood insiders wrote to the judge in support that he would receive no jail time, that Brian Peck would receive no jail time. And this is like one of those things. It's like being a cog in like the wheel or whatever. It's like, or the kind of like, you know, like, I don't know. I feel like that's why the Illuminati is like a thing. Is it? I don't know. I'm not in the Illuminati, so I can't confirm if it's real or it's false. But this is why rumors like that actively, you know, keep gaining steam, and they stay around, because it's like, you know, the people in the inside, they protect their own, even in the face of like this dude was out in the open wrong. Like he made some sketchy choices. He did. It wasn't like it was undeniable at this point. And it's really sad because Drake talks about it. And, he says that Brian's side of the courtroom had like 50 supporters, Hollywood insiders, lawyers, whatever. And Drake basically had like nobody, just his family. It wasn't like people were coming from Nickelodeon or whatever it was to, support Drake. He was just there with his family. And so, pretty wild. And Brian Peck got off like pretty smooth. He didn't, I don't think it ended up turning out the way that Drake Bell wanted it. But, anyways, from this whole like experience that Drake ended up enduring, like he basically talks in the show about how he struggled with substance abuse and mental health and other issues from this specific experience, which has got to be the most crazy thing ever, because if you're a kid and, you get on a big, huge show, like Drake Bell talked about how when he was a kid, all he wanted to do was basically act, right? And play for a living, like play characters and stuff like that. And he finally got the gig, to be on a Nickelodeon show. And then they, basically kind of rolled that into, hey, we're going to make the Drake and Josh show. And he was pumped. But then like as all this is happening, which the whole like offender thing that Brian Peck, ended up being guilty of happened before Drake and Josh even started, like before the pilot was even shot. But as like, the best moments of Drake Bell's life is kind of happening, his career's taken off. He's super famous. People love him. He's funny. The show's doing great and he's doing great in his career. Behind the scenes, he's dealing, with all of these issues. And so he talks about how it really was, a lot of the biggest moments and the best moments of his life that should have been were overshadowed by these problems. And it's a horrible thing, and also important to note that like Drake Bell's dad, I don't know his name. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but he felt like the whole Pickle Boy Brian Peck guy was suspect from the beginning. He kind of saw it. And while he was his manager, he was really kind of keeping his eyes on Brian Peck. He was really making sure that they weren't too close with one another, that Brian was kept at, always in eyesight and at an arm's length and everything. But then when Brian was able to get in the mind of Drake Bell, because he's a master manipulator, I guess, and Drake's also a kid, and it's Hollywood and stuff like that, and Brian Peck had connections and all of that, then, he was pretty much free to do what he wanted to in the regard of kind of taking over that managerial position and spending as much time with Drake as he wanted to, and then kind of starting the abuse even further. So, really hard thing to watch, especially for me, because as a kid, I grew up with Nickelodeon and the slime, and since I grew up like close to Charlotte, there's this park there, amusement park called Carowinds, and it was a Paramount park when I was a kid. So the theme and everything was Nickelodeon. It was like you had like the Rugrats. There used to be a ride there called the Super Saturator, and it was the coolest ride on the face of the planet. You could literally drop water bombs on people that were just walking beneath it. And if they hadn't been to the park, they had no idea that you could just drop water bombs on them. So we literally would get on this ride. Your legs could hang, so you were sitting on like a chair, and then your legs would hang and stuff like that. And you had like a little lever, and you just, you'd pull it, but you would try to size them up. You know what I mean? You would try to make sure that it was somebody that had on just like normal clothes, just wasn't expecting it at all, and just boom, dropping bombs on them as they go by. Water bombs, that is. And like people could shoot up at you, with like water guns. It was cool, man. And like it was all themed out and had to be the most expensive ride to upkeep ever, because it was all, pretty much underwater. Not underwater, but there was a pool of water beneath it. And then there was water shooting up at you as you were riding it, and you were dropping bombs. It was awesome. It really was. But, you had all types of little like theme, like SpongeBob, Wild Thornberries, just the coolest rides. And man, like that was there in the height of, for me, like the whole slime thing with Nickelodeon. And it was such a big part of my childhood. I love Hey Arnold. I love the shows from Nickelodeon during that time. I love Drake and Josh. It's a good show. I still watch it today. It's a great show, and they did a great job doing it. It just sucks that It's the behind the scenes. It's just like, oh man, what a horrible, horrible thing. It just, man, it hurts your soul. And, because those shows hold a special place in my heart, and it's weird. But fame, the lesson of this is fame isn't always what it seems. And, I know for me, being a creative person, not specifically related to the abuse and stuff like that, but I think related to the writers, taking the L and sharing a salary just so that they can get their opportunity and stuff like that. Man, that is just like still around today. Maybe not that specific case because you've got the Writers Guild and all that sort of stuff, but people feeling like they have to take L's just to be able to do something that they want to do for a living, like, a creative work. Creative people, are prone to be exploited, I feel like, and many people who want to do what they love, can be put in bad situations because, not that I'm putting blame on anyone's, experiences or anything like that, or on the creative people, because it's kind of like they call it a rite of passage sort of situation. I don't think it's right, though, to be real. I don't think it's right. And I know for me, when I did my internship or whatever, and I had a few different ones, but when I specifically worked at the studio, and there was a lot of like, drugs there, and there was a lot of like, just honestly not a really good culture. It was a lot of like kind of hip hop people. So, a lot of trap music and rap music and famous people. I don't want to say names because I'm not trying to put anybody out there, or whatever. But, it was a question for me. I mean, it was a question of like, just being overworked and feeling used. You felt used up is how I felt when I was there working at that gig. And I know I don't want it to sound like first world problems. I know, that sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do to get where you want to go if it's gonna lead somewhere good. But that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it just won't. And sometimes there are people out there that are just looking to take advantage of people who want to do creative work. Like maybe you want to be a music producer or an actor or whatever it is. And they really don't have any plans to help you get where you want to go, or they can't. You know what I mean? Or they can't, but they sell it like they can, and then they put you to work cleaning bathrooms, or they, put you in sticky situations and keep you up for 2 days only to not fulfill on their promises and only to make you feel like, you start to question yourself. So anyways, that's not everybody. I've had experiences like that. Maybe you watching or listening have had experiences like that too, but creative work is a hard thing. It's a hard thing to do for a job. Because everybody obviously wants to do something cool or fun for a living. If you can make music or if you can act or whatever, there's just an overabundance of people that want to do it and not that many opportunities to go around. So inevitably you get stuck with, a lot of people saying you got to go through the mud if you want to get an opportunity. You got to, hike up the mountain with 100 pounds on your back if you want to make $15 an hour. We ain't just out here giving away money to people who want to do graphics. You know what I'm saying? Like they trying to really send you through the ringer. And if you're a creative person, watch out for that. It's fine to do free work, but make sure you're getting something in return for that free work, whether it's like legitimate experience. But me working at a studio for 2 days and not even learning anything or getting into studio sessions or whatever, and them expecting me to be a janitor for free and me being up for 2 days, you out your mind. I left that thing, and I don't regret it in the slightest. So we're going to move on to the next story, if that's all right with everybody. This is from CBS News here, and this is a situation where Biden has new plans for student loan forgiveness. The new plan could erase some or all of student debt for roughly 30 million people. Will that be you? Let's find out together on the TreMade commentary. From CBS News, it's no secret that student loan debt's out of control. Around 43 million people are carrying a whopping $1.7 trillion. Yeah, that's $1.7 trillion in student debt. It's as if there's some reasoning behind young people not being able to afford homes. If it's not the crazy high home prices, high interest rates, or investment firms buying up all the single-family homes in America, it's probably student loan debt. There are 5 groups of people who could benefit under this new initiative, right? The first are people who have been in repayment for 20 years or more. For graduate loans, like master's degree, I guess doctoral degrees, that sort of thing, it's 25 years or more. So a little bit longer if you, chose to get more educated and get that advanced degree. 20 years is a long time to have been in repayment. So if you ask me, it could be a little late, but hey, at least they're talking about it. The second is for people who basically got ripped off. That's me paraphrasing here, but if you got a degree that isn't marketable and or you can't earn more than a high school grad, you might be eligible. Now, for this one specifically, I can get behind, because how many people go to college for, English or like business or something random, and then they get out, they got sucked into the scam of, you got to go to college to get paid well. They got sucked into that scam, and then they get out of school, and then they're like, well, you don't have any experience. How's $10 an hour sound? You know what I mean? You know what? Well, we got a 1099 sales position. Can you twirl a sign? We call it marketing. You know what I mean? So anyways, if you cannot, if your degree is just totally useless almost, you just can't get ahead, this is supposed to, help with that. You might qualify under this new plan. The third, people experiencing financial hardship. People who are at risk, high risk of defaulting on their student loans. For example, people dealing with issues such as medical debt. Maybe you've got a medical illness or something like that was unforeseen, and you are struggling in the trenches trying to even stay alive or something like that. I mean, why should you have to, be held down by student loan debt if you ain't even getting on well? You just having a hard time making it day by day, dealing with medical debt. Biden is saying that this new plan could benefit you, possibly. Again, these are for people who might qualify, depending on the circumstances. The fourth is for people whose balance increased exponentially because of interest. Despite making monthly payments on time, some people have paid only to see no reduction in their balance. Around 20 million people in this category could get up to $20,000 of their interest canceled. You're not really making any payments to the principal because the interest is just stacking up so fast. You just keep, it keeps growing. So you're paying, thinking it's cool. Oh, my minimum payment's $200. And then you pay the $200, and that balance just keeps going up because your interest rate is too high for it to really do anything. The fifth, 2 million people who qualify but haven't applied. This provides relief for low and middle income borrowers who qualify for income-driven repayment plans and programs like public service loan forgiveness. The last effort for him to pass through widespread student loan relief was blocked by the Supreme Court. The plan, this one here is undoubtedly going to face challenges by conservatives who feel it's unfair to taxpayers who paid off their student loans or chose not to go to college because they'll be footing the bill. So yeah, people, unfortunately, this might be where I'm gonna rub some people the wrong way. I paid off my student loans. I'm not saying it to toot my own horn. I'm not saying it from a place of, of ego. I'm just saying that when I went to college, I graduated and I took a job in sales that didn't require any sort of college degree. Now, that job was straight buns. It sucked. You know what I mean? It was booty cheeks. And I was selling internet, TV, and phone and personal device protection for your phone and other, electronics and stuff like that. And I got really good at it. I made $10 an hour on the hour. And then the rest of the money that I made was strictly from commission, right? And I was one of the best salespeople there. And I worked my butt off, and I was very fortunate. And I also understand that I was even lucky to have an opportunity like that. And then also lucky that I had the work ethic and maybe I don't know if you can call it genetics or environment or whatever it was, to have the get up and go and the mental capacity and also the emotional capacity to deal with that really hard sales role. And I ended up making a pretty good amount of money. I paid my student loans off in 6 months. So I really never had to make any sort of interest payments or anything like that. I got lucky, I guess. But it was, a combination of luck, circumstance, and also a lot of hard work. I didn't just fall into paying them off. So, when I hear about student loan relief and stuff like that, I can't lie to you. I think, man, maybe I shouldn't have paid them off. I got to tell you, though, it is super nice that I don't have to worry about it. And I haven't had to worry about it, since I graduated college, which at this point was a pretty long time ago, So ultimately, I'm glad that I did it. But, Yeah, I mean, if I could get that money back, if I could have just rolled that balance and left it there and then got it relieved or whatever. I mean, are you kidding? That would have been incredible. But, because I really went through the ringer, paying a lot of money into this pit, to this debt. And then, to see other people just getting relief from it and stuff like that. I don't feel like I'm jealous or anything like that. I'm just saying it would have been nice if it was around at the time when, I was dealing with it, because for me, when people say I can't pay it or it's impossible, I do think genuinely some people's circumstance just doesn't yield or doesn't make it possible for them to really do much with it. Or maybe it's just gotten too out of hand. They're just kind of stuck. That happens. But I also will say that, I don't buy into this idea that it's impossible for everybody to pay their student loans back, because I know that I did it. I did it, so, but yeah, I mean, I do think it's good for us to figure out a way to avoid taking on more student debt. Like, college is way too expensive for what you get, and they're still selling that same scam that if you spend $100,000 on this college degree, you'll be able to make more money than what you spend, and that isn't true. Like, college graduates are making less than they ever have, I feel like. Now, I don't have a necessary statistic to back it up, but I can tell you that when I graduated college, obviously, like I said, I had 2 bachelor's degrees and a minor, and I took the sales job because I couldn't get anything else. It was the only thing that I could get. It ended up working out because I made it work out, but it wasn't ideal, and I didn't have a degree in sales or nothing. I never wanted to really do it. I just ended up doing it because that was the card that I was dealt, and I tried to make the best of it. Next up, I thought this was interesting. We've got from CBS, a smoking laptop burned student during a test at a Massachusetts school. Like, the whole class or whatever had to evacuate because this one laptop decided to malfunction and start melting. And I'm like, when I was a kid, doing like a SAT, bro, you know what I'm saying? I might have coded that laptop to start melting to get out of an SAT. You know what I mean? If it was possible for me to escape a SAT, why do I want to sit there for 4 hours? I could deal with a burnt hand. I'd rather deal with a burnt hand than deal with taking an SAT for 4 hours. Everybody's going to remember that for the rest of their life, because the whole class got evacuated and they had to turn in their computers. They started doing tests on all these computers. So they at least postponed this test who knows how long, indefinitely. If I was a kid and someone's hand got burnt during a test, I'd be like, bro, we had to take the SAT. Somebody's computer caught on fire and we evacuated the building. Like, you would never forget it. You know what I mean? The universe was conspiring to not make those kids take them tests. My mom, she's a teacher assistant, and she's been a teacher for a long time. And I can tell you that she's been in it for like over 20 years. So like, they make these kids these days, it's nothing but tests. When I was a kid, I felt like we had too many tests, SAT, ACT, whatever it was, midterm, final, whatever they come up with as a name, but it was just like, to me, it was like test. And what made it worse is that it was like, this test is 70% of your grade. You know what I mean? Like, we don't do anything else for the rest of the year. We got one test, and that's the only thing that we're graded on. I'm like, for the people that aren't good test takers, man, they got some BGs, or they got the bubble guts the night before they got to go to school the next morning. You might see some people out. You know what I mean? Sally, who's got the bubble guts, she ain't coming to school on the test taking day. She gonna skip it, and she gonna wait till after class so that she can, take it. Because she can't even get to school. She's so nervous that this teacher said, this is 70% of your grade, and if you don't pass it, you're going to fail. And she's like, but I'm a great student, Anyways, that was my experience when I was a kid. And so I'm like, I can imagine. If there was a way for me to get out of it, I might have suffered with some skin. I might have burnt my hand. You know what I mean? I might have coded the computer saying, Anyways, I would have had no knowledge how to code a computer, but if I can get out of it, I was getting out of it. Next, NBC News. Boeing whistleblower says the Dreamliner 787 airplane could break apart because of safety flaws. Isn't this sketch? Like, I watched a documentary recently on Boeing airplanes, and it was crazy enlightening. And it was the most mind-blowing thing to watch. But let's go through this article, then we'll talk about it. The Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, is investigating claims that another Boeing airplane could have safety flaws. Notice how I say another. Sam Salapur worked as an engineer at Boeing for more than 10 years, and he says that a change in the construction process introduced shortcuts that caused parts of the plane's main body to be improperly fastened together. He warned that these parts could fall apart over time. Why is this important, you ask? Because I just watched that documentary about the Boeing 737 MAX airplane having a bad sensor, which caused 2 airplanes to fatally crash. And the sensor was tied to a program called an MCAS system. And the purpose of MCAS was to automatically adjust the plane downward if it went up at too great of an angle. Right, so if the plane's going up like this, right, so it's supposed to just go up gradually. If it ends up going at too great of an angle, you might ask, well, why would that even happen? Because to make the plane larger with the 737 MAX, to make it bigger, they had to position, I think, the jets like further back on the end of the airplane, which could cause a problem with it tilting back too far. So what do? Well, they developed this thing called an MCAS system, which is essentially like this program, software or whatever, that's tied to a system. So, if the plane goes just down too far, then, it could cause the plane to stall. And if the plane stalls, obviously that's a no-go, right? So the problem with this and what the documentary was about was that there was only one sensor. It was right outside of the cockpit on like the left side or something like that. A small little sensor, which is wild. And I'll tell you why in a second. But the MCAS system took control of the plane and caused it to nosedive. That was what the documentary was on. So, pilots, they take off and they weren't even flying that long. They took off like normal. And then all of a sudden the sensor was bad that was tied to the MCAS system, which is designed to turn or to point the plane down to level it out. Well, because the sensor was bad, the plane was essentially going into a nosedive repeatedly. And the pilots didn't know what was going on because this was a new plane, right? Like Boeing was like, there was already a 737 and it was like a new generation. And essentially to save money, they made it so that you wouldn't have to go through training. So they pretty much buried the whole MCAS like situation. They didn't want to tell anybody about it or draw too much attention to it because the FAA would see it as a new feature and would order pilots to go through training. And training is expensive, right? For flights and stuff like that for pilots. So they didn't want to do that. And they knew that if pilots had to go through and be retrained, then they would sell less planes because now airlines have to put their pilots through training and that's expensive and et cetera. So they just pretty much buried it. And they didn't tell pilots really, they didn't train them on it. So they didn't know what was going wrong when they were in the air. They just knew that like, this plane keeps nosediving. Like we're trying to go up and it just is like sending them back in a nosedive because the sensor's bad and there's only one of them, right? And so what happened? Well, 2 planes crashed. The first one was in a foreign country. It was like Indonesia or something like that. I can't remember exactly where, but it was something like that. And the plane, wasn't American. It was a different ethnicity. And so what did Boeing try to do? They tried to blame it on that it was, overseas, that it wasn't in the USA or something, which is crazy that they did that. And obviously ethically wrong. Who cares where it was or where the guy was from? It doesn't matter. We're all human beings. But they did that and they tried to cover it up and that was their excuse. Well, it happened again, right? And that was the problem. They, I guess, were just banking that it was only going to happen one time. Well, it happened again. And both times planes crashed and everyone, passed away, right? And so they tried to cover it up and they repeatedly, basically put the incompetence on the pilots that were from a different country, saying that, because they're not from the USA, they didn't get as good of training, et cetera. And it was this big ordeal. And Boeing ended up, I think, having to pay like billions of dollars in a settlement or something like that because of this issue. But John Barnett, a former quality inspector, raised concerns about safety and was found dead in Charleston while conducting legal action against Boeing, which is suspect. You know what I mean? Like Boeing obviously is a huge company. It's a celebrated company because it has a rich history in aviation. It's been around for forever. And historically, Boeing has a great safety record and a great name for making quality aircrafts. However, this is not, as of late, the documentary, this news article, the safety concerns, is not painting that picture, right? Also, It gets worse. Earlier this year, a door panel blew off an Alaska Airlines flight in midair on the 737 MAX 9, which is, the 737 MAX was the same plane, or I don't know if it's the same plane, but they got the same name, with the whole MCAS problem, right? The only difference is the 9. So passengers, I saw this video, right, from, where is this from? I think it was CBS, NBC. This is from NBC News. So I saw this video on this article. Passengers are literally flying, minding their business like normal in midair, and the door's off. I didn't see the door blow off, but you could see that there's no door. It's just black. And they're on the plane, which obviously is going to cause the cabin to depressurize or whatever, cause decompression. And it's wild. I mean, imagine if you were on a plane, you pay for a flight and then the door blew off in midair. Bro, I gotta tell you, if I survive, you're gonna hear from me. I'm gonna be ticked. That's wild. But yeah, so immediately the FAA got involved and grounded some of the Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes for safety inspection. Obviously to check the door plugs to make sure that this wasn't going to happen again. And basically, this is a trend. It seems like that Boeing is kind of developed this culture that's more focused on making money than ensuring safety, and that's where they've really kind of come under fire. And a lot of their people who work for them have been saying the same thing. They've been sounding alarms, saying that they just want us to make planes better, or not better, but faster. They want to cut people and they want to reduce cost and this, that, and the other. And man, I mean, when you're designing airplanes and you're building them, that's a risky business. Your entire image is built on being able to get to one place to another safely without crashing and burning. You know what I mean? That's a little you know what I mean? I feel like if you were to do a poll of the biggest fears, obviously a lot of people have a fear of flying, and even more people have a fear of crashing in a plane, right? I've heard a lot of stories of that happening. People crashing and all that sort of stuff. And yeah. So I don't even know. It's just that whole capitalism thing. You know what I mean? You take a good thing, a good company that's making good, reliable products. They're safe, they're secure, backed by great engineering and built, strong. And then the shareholders, the pressure to continue to drive more profits and cut costs. It is the downfall of, it seems like, I'm not going to say every company, but it is a downfall of a lot of them. It is a huge problem that we have. And it's a race to nowhere. You know what I mean? This whole idea that you have to continually grow and continually make more money. And I get it. That's just the way our society and economy is set up, but it ruins a lot of great companies. And it seems like that's what's happening to Boeing. Anyways, it's super interesting. That documentary on Netflix, I can't remember what it's called, but it was enlightening. I recommend. Speaking of documentaries or docuseries, I've been watching this new one on Netflix. It's called Files of the Unexplained. It's Forbes says it was the fourth most watched English TV show on Netflix. It generated 4.4 million views in the first 7 days in April, which is a ton. I feel like if I generate 4.4 million views, I'm hype. I've done it a few times with some short videos, not yet with any sort of long form content or anything like that, but I would be hype. So if you want to hit the like button and you want to share and subscribe, tell the world about your boy TreMade. Just let everybody know, hey, I'm enjoying this new content from this guy that I may or may not have ever heard of, but he's pretty cool. Anyways, I appreciate it. Yeah. So basically it's a wild documentary, talks about a lot of different stuff, but obviously things that kind of mystery, things that they can't explain. But what I love about it is the whole alien aspect of it. And in the first episode, it's about two guys telling their story about how they were abducted by aliens. And they said they had no neck and had claws like crabs for hands. So like pinchers, you know what I mean? Which totally goes against anything that, I've heard about the description of aliens. We've it's been a hot topic here recently with that dude I can't remember his name, but he's been on Joe Rogan, and he was kind of like a whistleblower, some sort of ties to the military or something like that, talking about like, oh, and then we had that one thing in like Mexico where it was like the alien being or whatever. It was like 3 foot tall, and it looked like kind of like a traditional alien. That just kind of went poof. I remember seeing it and then pulling it up, but then it just kind of went away. So don't know what happened with that. If anyone knows what the story on that little 3 foot alien looking thing is, let your boy know. One thing I will say about the whole alien thing that's so weird is, why is it always like, random people from like a place like Idaho? You know what I mean? Like, and then they're on the news and they're like, well, what, evidence do you have that aliens exist or whatever? And they're like, I seen them. You know what I mean? They're just like, I seen them, man. They're like, well, how do you know? Like, did you take any photos or no? But I seen them. That's what it's like, man. It's always these people in the middle of nowhere that are just like, I seen them. And why do we not have any better photos? Like, everyone has a phone. You know what I mean? Everyone has, laptops, tablets, whatever it is. That's the one thing to me that is weird. But they talk about this whole issue, being abducted and I guess being kind of like poked and prodded, that sort of thing. They don't really say like what they did. They just said that it was sort of kind of like a dream, but then they realized it wasn't a dream. Anyways, it's interesting. But even more is that apparently 40% of Americans believe alien spaceships have visited Earth from other planets or galaxies. And that's from a 2021 Gallup poll, right? Which, I don't know. You imagine that? I heard something the other day that the orangutan species, like, it recently learned from watching humans how to spear fish, like how to hunt with like a spear and spear fish for food. And it just learned from watching. And, I've heard of this theory or this notion that maybe, we were put here by aliens, or there was some sort of alien intervention that helped us advance, a lot faster, gave us some sort of technology or whatever it may be, or maybe we were just put here. I've heard of this thing called like, we're like a farm for aliens. I've heard a bunch of different theories, but anyways, it's interesting that this orangutan, they say that it's like it's in the Stone Age or whatever, is what I've heard. Now, don't quote me on this. I'm not saying that's an absolute fact, but it has learned how to spear fish and use tools, right? And we're watching this happen. Like, you can, like, follow this and see it unfold. And so it's like, well, what if, there was something that was way more advanced than you and I are? And, back when we were, just like cavemen or whatever, and they were watching us unfold. It's kind of a weird thing to think about, or a wild thing to think about. But I mean, with the orangutan, it kind of makes you think, like, is it out of the realm of possibility? On to the next story. An audit discovers that California spent $24 billion on homelessness, but didn't consistently track outcomes. And this is from CBS News. Essentially, they spent all this money, but they don't know if it actually improved anything or their homelessness situation. And actually, the CBS News article says that it didn't improve in many cities. So effectively, they, are actively saying that it didn't change anything. And I think this was over the course of 5 years, the $24 billion. Out of the 5 programs, they could only evaluate 2 of them because the other 3 didn't have enough reliable data. So, yeah, they got a problem there. They're taking $24 billion, from, I'm assuming, taxpayers, right? And they're spending it on homelessness, which is, a worthy thing, because I don't know if I'm sure you do, but homelessness in California is a serious issue, and it is not slowing down. And it's basically running people out of there. I'm all for like trying to figure out ways to combat it, ways to rectify it and solve the problem. I don't know what the solution is. I think it's a byproduct of some larger problems that we have going on. It's like one of those things like, oh, you give people money and stuff like that, but then they come back and they ask for more, because it's like, you pretty much have to support them, indefinitely. Because we have bigger problems like mental health, problems like drug addiction, fentanyl, all of these huge issues that are running rampant in or in the world, but specifically in the United States, because that's where I'm at, that aren't being solved. access to mental care, access to detox programs. And then, it's a whole issue, and I don't know what the solution is. But anyways, it's great that they're trying to figure out the whole situation with the homelessness in California. But it is suspect that they don't have a good track record of, analyzing, like, we spent $24 billion. Did it work? What do we get for it? And they can't tell you that. They take so much money in taxes. I'm not in California, but like taxes, does anybody like them? You know what I mean? I don't think anybody likes taxes. But they sure seem to take a ton. Everywhere you turn, tax. You spend money, tax. You make money, tax. You buy property, tax. It's never ending. They probably, like, you imagine how many meetings they have about taxing. Literally, it's probably a meeting a day. How can we get more tax? Wait, we're all like, maybe we could, tax their property. We're already doing that. Oh, yeah, you're right. Let's tax it more. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? But it's ridiculous. And, for you to spend your money, giving it to them, they take it and they try to, fix something, but they don't know if it worked. They don't even have an accounting of it. That's suspect, and that's a thing that's happened as well in other areas, like situations of war, helping out other countries and things like that. Don't need to get into it, but, we spend so much money, billions and billions and billions of dollars of taxpayers' money, trying to help out war or whatever, and, or contributing, and, it's just like poof, gone. They do audits and they can't come up with where the money went. You know what I mean? And it's like everybody's working, the W-2 jobs or 9 to 5 or whatever. We're all doing that. And it's like, you lose so much money in taxes, and that's what they're doing with it, like, and then they want us to literally tell them everywhere that you make $1. It's the most mind-blowing thing ever. And not only that, but it's also against the law to not tell them where the money came from, to not pay your taxes. But then they can take our money and they can go and they can spend it frivolously without any record of it and just be like, poof, gone. We did an audit and we don't know where it's at. And then, that's their excuse. It's ridiculous. I don't even know why it's a thing, but it is, it's mind-blowing. But, yeah, that's the thing. On to the next segment. And we're going to wrap this up with a couple of videos. We're going to watch them together, see what they talking about. This is from that dude, Theo Vaughn. Let's go.
Do you see a lot of this Cat Williams stuff, man?
Yeah. That's been crazy.
I got a statue of him at home.
Really?
Yeah, I got a Christmas statue. It's like a Christmas Cat Williams that I have in my home. I bought it at Michael's a few years ago.
Why would you? What even inspired that? What is the reason?
I saw it. They had 2 left in there, and they was on
sale.
I didn't think they should have been, but
Bought both of them.
I got one. There it is.
I don't even think that was Cat Williams. That was just
It ain't, baby.
But that was a black fucking what do you call the shit?
Cat Williams. That's what you call it.
No. That's a black nutcracker.
You ain't telling me that ain't a fucking Cat Williams, bro.
That's not Cat Williams.
I'm taking that bitch
Somehow, some way, that's fucking racist. That's not Cat Williams.
That ain't racist, bro.
Black nutcracker, bro.
I'm supporting the culture. How many people got a fucking black Cat Williams in the house for Christmas?
Not Cat Williams.
Zoom in on his face a little bit, bruh.
Now that you say it, I kind of see it.
That is hilarious. Man, I love Theo Vaughn. He is just like, it's like he's on planet left field. You imagine that, though? Having like he's clearly a nutcracker, but having a life-size Cat Williams at home, every time you get home, it's like, welcome home, baby. It's time to eat some pancakes. Like, that would be just crazy funny. It did look like Cat Williams, though. Next video, here we go. This is from Randomly Medicine on TikTok.
So, random family medicine doctor, and just let me preface what I'm about to say with I'm doing fine financially, right? Like, I am a doctor and I have money to be comfortable, but I am nowhere near as comfortable as I thought I would be when I started this whole journey. I thought being a doctor would afford me certain financial freedom that I am really not experiencing at this point in my career. I'm here at the gas station filling my car up with gas and just like have a pit in my stomach about how much money I'm about to drop on gas.
Wow. You imagine being a family medicine doctor and not like are feeling apprehensive about getting gas? Man, you imagine that? When I was a kid, if you were a doctor, you were rich. You know what I'm saying? And this dude is over here talking about how he's got a pit in his stomach about if he, buying gas. It's pretty wild. Let's keep going.
So I've grown up in a suburban religious community area for most of my life, and so I've been surrounded by Dave Ramsey messaging my whole life. And I think it's really funny how the messaging has changed, because I remember when I was a kid, you'd hear Dave Ramsey and similar financial advice about living within your means, and it was always followed, live within your means. You can't have that big house and big car and trip to Disneyland. And then a few years later, it gets to be less. It's like, live within your means. You can't have that big car and fancy house. No one's even talking about the trip to Disneyland anymore because nobody's getting that anymore. And then, a few years later, it's like, you can't drive that fancy brand new car. No one's talking about that big house anymore because no one's even trying to get the big house anymore. And we've gotten so far down this that the rich people are like, you shouldn't be buying a $6 cup of coffee. And you should be investing what's left. That's $6 that you're spending on coffee. That should be investing. And it's just funny how living within your means has gotten less and less ridiculous. Living within your means now is don't buy too much fancy coffee. So that's where we're at.
Dave Ramsey is a wild individual. I mean, he's a guru, a glorified guru. A lot of people like him, and this might rub people the wrong way, but it ain't rocket science, man. You spend less than you make. Right. And that is the foundation of his teaching, right? You spend as little as you can and you basically live a horrible life so that you can live a better life later, right? And, that does work if you can spend less. My concern is that you can be the guy that tries to save every penny, that tries to refrain from going to the coffee shop, that tries to refrain from going on that trip with your friends. And at the end of it, at the end of all this saving and everything, you're still left with not enough money to really do anything. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you can retire, and just live the rest of your life. Like, you need a large sum of money to do that, right? So I think the problem is a lot of people feel like it's a drop in the bucket, and we do want to enjoy our lives while we're here. And because we don't know how much time we have left. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I'm going to, I hope. And, that's the hope for us all, that we're going to be here next week or tomorrow or whatever. But for a lot of people, they're facing that much harder than maybe you and I are. People that are in good health. And so it's like, enjoying your life and being present and having experiences and stuff like that is also very valuable too. So it is this weird balance where it's like, or maybe it's not a balance. It's like you got to be okay with spending the money and not have anything later, and maybe being able to maybe have more experiences in life and hope that you can make more money as you get older. But if you can't, like, we all kind of have to operate in this system. I don't think it's a great setup. I'll be real. I don't think the people who created it initially, foresaw that this is how it would go. I mean, some people, some critics, like, and I won't get into the economic side of it or whatever, or philosophical side of the whole capitalist society and everything, because we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, some people did foresee that this would be the case. Back then when they were implementing the system and everything. And I'm not saying that capitalism is bad or anything. It's just like, it is obvious that this is a place that we would get to. And unfortunately, for me, the way that I choose to kind of operate is I am on the reduction path, right? I do refrain and exercise discipline from getting the fancy coffee or going on the trips or buying the premium car or whatever, because I could for sure go buy a sports car or whatever I wanted. Maybe not whatever. It's not like I'm going to go buy a Bugatti or something. But yeah, I mean, I could, get something better or whatever. But do I need it? No, I don't. And I would rather be able to have more money in my pocket, to have freedom of time, freedom of career choices, freedom of, if I want to take time off or whatever, just like certain freedom, of having some money. It gives you this peace of mind. So for me, I am willing to cut out on the coffee and stuff like that. But I also do understand, and I feel it as well, just like everybody else does, that things are so expensive and they're not getting better. And unfortunately, I don't think that they will, unless some sort of catastrophe happens and we end up being forced into some sort of big recession, which will happen probably eventually. I'm not saying that with absolute certainty. I mean, in my opinion, it's probable history does repeat itself, and it's kind of like eventually will the Earth get hit by a meteor? Probably. You know what I mean? Eventually. How long will it take? Unknown. But will it happen? Probably. Just like if you stare up at the sky, there's a certain number of shooting stars, if it's clear, that go by. If you stare up there long enough and you don't blink, you'll see one eventually. You know what I mean? So it's like that sort of thing. But yeah, anyways, Dave Ramsey, he is outdated. He is harsh, but he's also in the system too. I mean, he's trying to make money. He's got a business. He's trying to be a little controversial. He's trying to sell his program, course, whatever it is that he offers. And, I do think, for me, this is not financial advice, but the way that I choose to operate is I try to put as much money, back as I can. I try to refrain from doing things that don't have. It's great, and you should take vacations and enjoy your life. But I try to make sure that I'm keeping more that I'm spending at all times. And I think for me that works out, and it gives me peace of mind. It's given me. It's helped to reduce my stress, and it's set me apart from people I feel like that are my age. It's given me some freedom, and I haven't had some of the same problems that people my age that I grew up with or whatever have had because of those decisions. Also, it helps that I don't have children and I'm not married as well. So that's another hack. Not that it's a worthy one, but I've made sacrifices as well. So but yeah, it's a crazy thing. Who would have thought when I was a kid, I would have never thought that things are this expensive. I never thought that the average home, never even considered that it would be, $417,000 is what it was when I last checked. I would have never thought that. It's a crazy time. And who would have known? You got to make that money, baby. That's what I tell people. They're like, oh man, it's so expensive to live. I say, yes, it is. And it is the worst. And unfortunately, you got to make that money, if you're, or you got to be comfortable with less or with settling, with less, and try to cultivate this sense of happiness with what you have. It's not easy because obviously having money can help solve a lot of problems. But, if you can cultivate this sense of peace or this sense of happiness in the face of great adversity with money or career or whatever, then when you do figure it out, you'll be that much more happier or that much more better off. And that's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Bye, everybody.